A huge welcome to Steve's Kitchen. Strap yourself in. This is going to be a long one. I thought about condensing this down to a simple mole recipe, but I'm a little bit too passionate, so I'm going to get into it in depth. We're going to be looking at mole from a foreigner's perspective, obviously, so I appreciate any feedback from my Mexican friends out there, because I know you know a lot more about this than I do. But I learned a lot when we were in Mexico. And if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we did the nixtamalized corn, which I think is one of the most important sort of elements in Mexican cooking. If masa is the sort of flesh of Mexican cooking, then definitely mole is the blood that runs through that. Before we start today's video recipe, I'm gonna fast forward to the end of the day. We've had our mole simmering on the side. I'm super impressed, really proud of what's come out. It smells delicious. It tastes absolutely gorgeous. I've had a little taste, but we put a couple of pieces of chicken in the mole to cook it off. And before I start with today's video, I just want to show you how gorgeous this mole has come out. And I can tell you now, I'm a little proud of this. It takes me right back to Oaxaca. This is not a bad mole. I'm going to tuck in, and then we're going to talk more about mole and Mexican food. Oh, so good. You're going to find mole running throughout all of Mexican food and cuisine. It is so complex and so delicious. If you ask 100 Mexican chefs or cooks how to make mole, you'll get 100 different recipes. If you ask a home cook or mama how she makes her mole, it will vary through the year depending on availability of different produce. Of course, chilies are really important. And we're not talking about spicy chilies. We're talking about sweet chilies. I mean, these are some anchos. I've got some smoked chipotle here. If I smell those, I'm getting sort of dates, sweet raisins. We've got a woody, smoky thing coming off of this chipotle. I've got 4 or 5 different varieties of chilies we're going to be using for this recipe. And I'm actually going to be making one of the most complex moles of all, a black mole or a mole negro. I saw this made so many times when we were in Oaxaca. And every time they told me it's really complex, so many different ingredients. I'm going to try and recreate it for you here today in a modest kitchen in Australia. And I hope, if anything, you come away with an idea how mole is made. Don't have to copy this particular recipe, but you'll get to understand how mole is made, and you'll be able to have a play and experiment with it at home. So right now I'm going to get on. I was actually going to do this on a flat griddle, similar to the comals they use in Mexico, but we did it yesterday. There's a lot of smoke involved. It gets really sort of sooty in here. So I decided we're going to simplify this so it can be made in pretty much any modern kitchen. We're going to do a lot of the baking in the oven, a little bit of stovetop cooking. Come on, let's get on and make mole negro. Now I've got a variety of chilies here. Why did I choose them? Well, no real reason. I got some cascabel here. They've got a really sort of peppery smell. I just basically chose what I liked. We've got the smoked chipotle here. Got the anchos, as I say, they've got a sort of sweet, raisiny sort of smell. Talk about sweet. These ones are almost like a sort of plum almost. They're lovely smelling chilies by the name of mulatto. These morita, they look like a dried prune, and they actually have a sort of peppery, sort of pruny smell to them. Really delicious. What we have to do to start with is start to deseed these. So we're just going to break open all of our chilies. Now we're not going to be getting rid of the seeds, by the way. Take all your seeds, put them onto a tray. Same with these cascabels. I'm going to take the stems out. I don't want the stalks. I'm not going to bother keeping the stalks, but I'm keeping all the veins and the seeds. Now, once we've separated out the seeds and the veins from our chilies, we want to lay them out on a baking tray. And normally this would be done on a comal. We'd be toasting these off, but I'm going to put this in a hot oven, about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 200 Celsius. And we're going to cook these for maybe sort of 20 minutes or so until they're really crispy and dark. And of course, underneath, we are not getting rid of all these lovely veins and seeds. We are going to be actually having a little bit of a bonfire with these later on. You'll see what I mean. Now, whilst the oven is nice and hot, we're going to use that to our advantage. I've got some tomatoes, onions and garlic, and we're just going to pop those on a tray as well, and I'm going to put those in the oven also. I really want them to roast dark, so I don't mind even if they start to burn a little bit. Now, I'm also going to put some fresh oregano on there as well. This is going to infuse great flavour, but it's also going to roast in the oven with the vegetables. Next up, I'm going to take our spices and our nuts, and I'm going to roast them on the stovetop in a pan. I'm starting with some cumin. I've got some allspice. I would have liked some fresh cinnamon and star anise, but I've only got powdered, so I'm going to use that. I'm also going to be toasting peanuts and almonds together. Now we'll put this onto a stove and we'll just sort of stir them around over a medium heat until they get a nice sort of toasty brown. Now, a word of warning, the other day we did this on the griddle. I thought it got a bit too smoky, but even doing this in the oven, you want a well-vented room. I mean, we're in middle of summer, I've got all the windows open, but it's still getting to the back of our throat. My chilies have got nice and crisp now, so I'm going to take them out of the oven. Whoa, the smell is actually making my eyes water. But you can see the chilies are lovely and crisp now. They've lost all of that sort of leathery softness they had before. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of crush these up a little bit. They're almost like powder now into a bowl. How beautiful. And be careful you don't breathe too much of this in. The smoked chipotles even crispier. And then what I'm going to do is take some chicken stock and I'm going to just cover over these chilies. So probably about a cup and a half of chicken stock. And we're just going to leave those to soak for the time being. Traditionally, mole has a sort of plantain type banana, which I couldn't get. These were lovely and green yesterday. They've started to ripen up already. They were a sour banana. And I'm going to slice these up and put them into some rendered pork fat or some lard. We're then going to fry our bananas or plantains until they get a little bit of colour in them. For a little extra sweetness, I'm also going to put about half a cup of raisins in there, or sultanas, either will do. At this point it gets interesting again. I've seen people putting in saltine crackers. I'm just going to use some stale ciabatta style bread that I've got here. You could actually use leftover tortillas. It's really just using up stale bread. So we're going to add that in now with our bananas. So I'm cooking the plantains, the raisin and the bread to get this lovely caramelized toasty surface on them. And they're packed full of the flavor of the pork lard. We've pretty much got all the components of our mole prepared now, and it's time to put this together. Now, I wish I had one of those beautiful mortar and pestles that they sold in Mexico, but they weighed a ton and I couldn't bring it back with me. But I do have a super modern food blender, which is going to do the job for us just as well. So we're taking the plantains, the bread, the raisins, all that lovely pork fat into our blender, along with our toasted nuts and all our spices. I'm going to add a little more chicken stock in with that just to help it blend. Switch the blender on, pop the lid on nice and tight. And we just want to blitz this to a nice smooth paste. Now I've added a little more stock. We've got something that's like a really thick, creamy peanut butter in here. We just get the lid off. There's a little bit of heat coming out, still nice and hot. At this point, I urge you to give this a try. Even this half-finished mole, wow, it is so delicious. Oh, yum. What I'm going to do now is take this and put it back in the pan with a little extra lard, and we're going to start cooking this up and add the rest of the ingredients. Remember our chilies? Oh, they smell so good. Just take a look at these. They've been soaking in that beautiful chicken broth. There's no real need to clean that blender out. We're just going to pour these straight in the blender. A little extra chicken stock in there as well. And now we're just going to blend this until they're really smooth. So it wants to go for quite a long time, but be prepared to be assaulted with your senses. The smell coming out here is going to be delicious. Now, the ladies of Oaxaca, they use those big mortar and pestles and they really diligently put lots of love into getting this as smooth as possible. So you need to blend this for a good 5 minutes to get most of the texture out of those chilies, but leave all the flavor in there. Now, we haven't forgot our tomatoes, onion and garlic, and of course the oregano, which was roasting in the oven. The onions are toasted. I am going to just remove the outer skins because that'll be a little bit tough. Now, see how crispy the oregano is? I'm actually going to pull out most of the stalks, but with the tomatoes, I'm actually going to leave the skins on. I'm not worried about some of the texture staying in. So we've got our 4 pieces of tomatoes there. Let's push this all into the center. So we've got this rich, look at this beautiful dark chili mole sauce. I'm going to add my onions, tomatoes, little bits of garlic, everything's going into the sauce. Lid back on, and I'm just going to blitz this again for about 3 minutes just to break down the vegetables. Now that's been going for about 3 minutes. I reckon that's done, but just to be safe, rather than pour this straight into the pan, which you could do by the way, no problem at all, I'm just going to run it through a sieve quickly to get any larger lumps out or bits of stalk or anything I might have left. Now look at that. All the smoked flavours, all the sort of nutty fruitnesses that come with that chilli are in there now. We're just going to mix this through. Now, as I say, the air is stinging the back of my throat, but the smell in here is just gorgeous. I mean, you really have to be. It's so intense, so delicious. Now, you remember all the seeds and the stalks that I kept. I put them into a small frying pan. This I am going to do outdoors though, because we're not going to just toast these until they're dark brown. I literally want to almost burn these. I don't even mind if a little flame comes up because we're going to make these into almost a charcoal, and that's where you get that intense color for the mole negro. Mole making, particularly mole negro, is not for the faint-hearted. Do be careful when you're cooking this. You're basically making a chili charcoal, and the fumes coming off it are pretty noxious. This really has to be done outside. We want to get the blackness and the flavoring out of this now. This is going into our blender. We're going to add a little more chicken stock just to help break down the carbon, and we're going to blend this up now to get all that beautiful blackness out of here. Man, that looks like squid ink, it's so dark. Now, you could sieve this, some people do. When I've seen it made in Oaxaca, they just put this straight into the mole. And I think that's what I'm gonna do. Look at that, we've got that lovely dark, inky mixture. And now the piece that we all love. I've got this beautiful bitter Mexican chocolate, rich and dark, just like the mole. I'm gonna add the whole block in there and just let the heat of the mole melt it down. The last thing I am going to do is add about a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half. There is no real seasoning in this at the moment by way of salt, so I'm going to add a little salt in there to develop the flavors. We are so near the finish line now. That has to simmer away for several hours. The longer you can cook that or simmer it for, the better the flavors will develop. Now, traditionally in Oaxaca, I saw they would put a little bit of chicken in with the actual mole as well and serve that as a treat at the end of the session. I'm going to put a couple of pieces of chicken breast in, and Michelle and I have those as a treat a little bit later on today. Now that's one big batch of mole, which I'm really pleased with. This will store for absolutely ages in the fridge. You can actually freeze mole as well if you like. We're going to be using it for some great recipes coming up on Steve's Kitchen. I'm going to wait for that to come off of the simmer. Enjoy a little bit of chicken, enjoy some mole. So we've come full circle from the beginning of the video to the end, and as I say, we let that simmer away on the stove for a good 3 to 4 hours, and it's just getting richer and richer in flavor. I'm really proud. It's come out so good. The flavors are really complex. If you haven't had mole like this before, you really should. I mean, you've got that sort of dark, rich sweetness. There's some chili kick in there. It's like chocolate. There's that sort of smoky aroma, and it's really just hard to explain. Mole is not really a food, it's almost an alchemy. Have some fun. Let me know what you think about this. Get the chats going down in the comments, and I'm going to close this off now with another mouthful of this delicious Oaxacan style mole negro. Cheers.